Welcome, everybody. I want to welcome you to this webinar. Let me make sure. Yeah, okay. My name is Carla Whitaker. I'm here from the California Student Opportunity and Access Program. And what we're going to be talking tonight is about financial aid. This is especially helpful for 12th graders or the families of 12th graders who might be needing to fill out the FAFSA form or the California DREAM Act. We're going to go over just what are some basic forms of financial aid, what are the forms like, what will they ask for, and we'll cover a few frequently asked questions and common mistakes that people can make sometimes on a form like the FAFSA. And then we will also open it up to Q&A. I know that although you won't be able to type in the chat, there is a Q&A that's open. And I do have two staff members who are here to help provide support on the question and answer section. If you go on the bottom of your Zoom screen, you might have a Q&A button, or under three dots with more, you might be able to tap that to see Q&A. And all you need to do is ask a question. You could ask it with your name or anonymously. And I have Tori and I have Charmaine, and they're here to help try to answer your questions. If there's one that they need to have me read out loud to me and try to have me answer to the whole group, I will do my best to do that as well. I'm not able to see the Q&A myself once I'm sharing screen. I also want to emphasize that this is being recorded and it will be posted tomorrow on our CalSOAP website, and also the slide deck that I'll be using, a version of that will also be posted on the CalSOAP website tomorrow. I've dropped that link into the chat. Okay, so it's the blog section of calsoapsandiego.org. And I want to welcome everybody to, if they need to catch a slide or if they didn't hear something or they want to share this with someone else, it will be available starting tomorrow on our website. I'm also going to, well, actually, you probably know my email address, but just in case, it's kkwhitaker@ucsd.edu. So if you have any questions afterwards, you're welcome to contact me. All right. And okay, I don't see anything in the Q&A yet. So, okay. All right, well, we'll go ahead and kick it off. I'll begin by sharing my screen. And again, if you have questions as we go, in the middle, at the end, anytime, please put them into the Q&A and we will do our best to answer them. All right. Okay. So who we are, CalSOAP. We are the CalSOAP in San Diego and Imperial counties. There are CalSOAPs throughout the state of California. They're run by CSAC, that's the California Student Aid Commission. And they all have a similar mission, which is basically to increase college going rates, especially among our lower income and first generation students. We serve students in San Diego County, students in Imperial County, and within the San Diego County, we work a lot with the San Diego Unified School District, as well as Sweetwater District, Grossmont District, Oceanside, Vista, various different school districts. And we offer everything from financial aid workshops to webinars. We offer middle school programs and presentations, summer college prep programs, lots of different things. If you're not already following us on social media and you're a social media fan, you please, follow us and look for things that we post. Or if you are not on social media and you would like to get maybe just a monthly newsletter by email once a month, you can contact me and I'll put you on our list for that as well. Okay, so what we hope you understand by the end of tonight is what are some of the frequently asked questions about financial aid, what are the important dates that are coming up, and what are additional resources that you can use. So what is financial aid? Basically, when we are talking about financial aid, we're not talking about, say, a car loan, okay? It's financial aid, but it's specifically any money that's being given to a student who's in higher education after high school at some form of college, vocational school, university, whatever. So when we say financial aid, we kind of mean educational financial aid. Who is eligible to receive financial aid? Almost everybody is eligible to receive some form of financial aid. All US citizens are eligible to fill out a FAFSA. Eligible non-citizens are able to fill out a FAFSA. And there are also, if you are an AB 540 student, like if you are undocumented or a DACA student, then you can fill out the California DREAM Act. The one exception would be if you have a non-immigrant visa, like a tourist visa, if you're on an FJH kind of visa, you might not be able to fill out the FAFSA or the DREAM Act. In that case, you might ask to fill out the CSS profile if a college will accept that, or you might have to look for scholarships or sources of funding that are non-governmental. All right, where does financial aid come from? Basically, a lot of it comes from the federal government, the state government, the colleges themselves, and also sometimes businesses and private organizations can help with forms of money for college. So here are some general frequently asked questions about financial aid. A lot of people want to make sure they understand what's the difference between a grant and a loan. Obviously, one of these words, and maybe both of them, could be intimidating or scary. We want to make sure that you understand that grants are great. They are free money that do not have to be repaid. Okay, so grant is free money. It's like a scholarship. It's money that is given to you. There's no interest attached to it. There's no strings attached to it, except maybe qualifying based on your income or your GPA. And it is free money that does not need to be repaid. The nice thing about grants is that usually there's just one form you have to fill out that will cover a variety of different grants. So if you're a high school 12th grader, okay, you're probably going to either fill out the FAFSA or the DREAM Act. All right. And the FAFSA, just simply by filling it out, that lets you know if you're eligible for a federal Pell Grant, for a California Cal Grant, for a Promise Grant if you're going to a community college. And also it will kind of help the universities, if you're applying to university, give their own grants. Like, for example, the UC system has something called the Blue and Gold, okay, which is for tuition. Now, if you're filling out the DREAM Act, this is if you're not a documented citizen, but you have been in California for 3+ years and going to school here, then you would fill out the DREAM Act. You're eligible for most of those same things. The last three things, the only thing you're not eligible for is federal money. For federal money, that does have to be, you do have to have citizenship or be a qualified non-citizen. And then also private scholarships can also be sometimes given. Sometimes they're called scholarships, sometimes they're called grants. Okay, like the Promise is one. Sometimes they refer to it as the Promise Grant. Sometimes they refer to it as the Promise Scholarship, but it's the same thing in the sense that it does not need to be paid back. And luckily, there's usually just one form that you fill out to find out which ones you're eligible for. Okay, so that makes it kind of easy. Loans, on the other hand, they are borrowed money. Not only must you pay them back after you graduate, but they have to be paid back with interest. Okay. If you're offered a federal or a state loan of any kind, just know that you are not obligated to accept it. Some people are afraid to fill out the FAFSA because they think that means that they're basically applying for a loan. That's not true. You are applying to see if you would qualify for a loan, and they might tell you yes or no. But if they offer you a loan of any amount, you are not obligated to take it. Okay, that's up to you to decide, should I take it, yes or no? And if I do take it, should I take it for the full amount they're offering, or should I ask for a smaller amount because I really don't want to borrow this much money? So let's say they offer $5,000 and you only need $2,000. It's okay to ask them, could I just get $2,000? And they will almost always say yes. So they're just telling you the maximum amount you could borrow. And again, it's up to you whether you want to accept that or not. If you're specifically looking for a federal or state loan, then the FAFSA or DREAM Act is the required application for that. That's what you'd have to fill out to get a loan from the federal or state government. Are there other ways to get loans? Of course, yes. You can borrow from a friend or family member. You can go to your local bank, your local credit union. There are a lot of different ways to borrow for loans. You don't have to go the government route. But if you would like to go the government route, which often offers a lot of low interest loans, then the FAFSA is the way to go, or the DREAM Act if you can't fill out the FAFSA. Okay, you hear these different kinds of grants, like Pell Grant and Cal Grant are probably the two we hear the most often. So what's the difference? Basically, Pell is federal. So that means you must complete the FAFSA, be eligible to fill it out and complete the FAFSA to be eligible for the Pell Grant. And it also is based on basically two main numbers, your family income and your family size, okay? Well, how much money is it possible to get out of a Pell Grant? That can change year to year, and it does change year to year based on federal budgets. But for this year, for example, the maximum, if somebody qualified for the maximum aid, so they had a lot of need, they could qualify for more than $7,000 worth of Pell Grant. All right. You can receive the federal Pell Grant for no more than 12 full-time terms, which is roughly 6 years, but that's it's still nice to know that it can be longer than 4 years that you can keep getting a Pell Grant. And you do have to complete that FAFSA every year to continue receiving it. So for every year of college, before you start that academic year, you've got to fill out the FAFSA, or I should say, yes, you're filling it out again, but really most of your information is saved from the previous time, and you're just updating things like any asset or income things that have changed. Also, because the Pell Grant is federal, that means it can be used throughout the USA. Okay, so it can be used in other states, it can be used public or private, but you are able to take, if you're awarded a Pell Grant, you're able to take it anywhere. Okay, so what are some of the things that make you eligible for a Pell Grant? This is a need-based program. So again, you do have to have a certain income level / family size combination to do that. You have to be a US citizen or eligible non-citizen. You have to have a social security number. You have to be enrolled or accepted to be enrolled as a student for a bachelor or a certificate program. You also have to be enrolled at least half-time. Okay. And that's for if you want to get direct loan program funds. You have to maintain satisfactory academic progress in college or career school. So you can't be getting under a 2.0, right? You have certain GPA minimum to maintain. You have to sign the certification statement saying that you're not in default on any loans and that you don't owe any money. Okay, so that is one of the things they're going to check. And it also you have to show you're qualified to obtain that education, like whatever minimum requirements they have for entry, that you have met those requirements and you're going to be able to start at that college, career, or university program. Okay, so what about the Cal Grant? It's another grant, which is great. It's more free money. You would not have to pay back. And by the way, you can get both a Pell Grant and a Cal Grant at the same time during the same year, during different years, but it is possible a lot of times if students qualify for one, they might also qualify for the other. So the Cal Grants are named A, B, and C, and those are just, they kind of depend on different things like the level of need and what type of school you're pursuing. It depends on your GPA, your household income and size. And also the Cal Grant can be used for any college in California, as long as it's either public. If it's private, it has to be nonprofit, or if it's for profit, like a proprietary college, they just have to be on the Cal Grant list. So these could be used at a university like San Diego State or UCLA or San Diego City College. So it could be a CSU, it could be a UC, it could be a community college, it could be a private college, even just one that's in the state of California and one that is accredited. And then you can see the family size, like, for example, if you have a family of 2, it has the Cal Grant income ceilings, like there's a maximum over which, you wouldn't be able to make more than that and still qualify for the Cal Grant. Okay, so at a community college, this kind of just breaks down for Cal Grant A, Cal Grant B, and Cal Grant C, how much money, if you qualify for that Cal Grant, how much you might be awarded. Cal Grant A doesn't apply at community colleges, but B and C do. So C is specifically, you have to be enrolled in some kind of occupational or technical hands-on program. And that money, like the $1,094 that you see there, that can be for books, for tools, for equipment, anything like that. And Cal Grant B, if you're at a community college, you could get up to a maximum of a little over $1,600 a year. And again, that could apply toward any community college costs. plus. You can again see that that increases for a CSU because their tuition is much more. So if you get the Cal Grant A at a CSU, it might be up to a maximum of $5,700. The Cal Grant B, your freshman year, could be up to $1,600. And then any other year besides freshman year, the Cal Grant B could actually be greater than that, like in the 7,000 plus range. Cal Grant C is not usually available at a CSU or a UC because they tend not to offer hands-on vocational programs. They tend to be offering more academic programs. And then again, you can see for the UCs where the tuition is higher again, that Cal Grant A, Cal Grant B, and Cal Grant C. C doesn't apply, but Cal Grant B your freshman year. And then another year, like say your sophomore, junior, senior year, you might even qualify for up to $1,400. All right. And again, I can't tell you what you'll qualify for. You have to fill out the FAFSA or the DREAM Act to find out. And once you fill it out with that family size, family income, they'll let you know what's called an SAI, a student aid index, which could be from negative 1,500 or 0 or 1,000 or 50,000. It just all depends. But anyway, it also is showing you the Cal Grant amounts that you're eligible for at a private nonprofit school or at a private for-profit school, but one that is WASC accredited. So those amounts are higher for private schools since usually their tuition is higher. Okay. Does completing the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, does it qualify me for scholarships? Is it a scholarship application? Well, the answer to that is a little complicated, okay? Kind of yes and no. There are many academic and merit-based scholarships that still require their applicants to have filled out either a FAFSA or a DREAM Act so that they can determine the student's remaining financial need. This is also a requirement for university scholarships if they're given directly from a university. So even if I'm offered, let's say that I go to SDSU and I'm applying to the Weber's Honors College and there is a special grant for me or a special scholarship for me, even if I don't technically have as much financial need as the FAFSA would give me, maybe that specific scholarship program at San Diego State will give it to me. But guess what? It's not that they necessarily need to know every detail of my finances or that I have to hit a certain level, but they will not even consider giving you scholarship money sometimes unless you have filled out the money, unless you have filled out the form. They want you to at least to have filled it out. So even if the grant itself or the scholarship itself is not need-based, they still want you to fill out that need-based financial aid form so they can have you in their system and they can have that information about you. So I do know people who have not qualified for the amount of state and federal money that they wanted to, like from the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, but because they filled it out, it made them automatically eligible for a scholarship from a certain college. And even though that money came right from the college and their scholarship donors, pardon me, it's still, you had to have filled out a FAFSA or DREAM Act to even be considered for that. So just know that that's a possibility. So when you submit your FAFSA, it doesn't guarantee you'll get a scholarship. It doesn't send it to a private scholarship company or anything like that, but it does help you in most college financial aid offices to have filled out a FAFSA or DREAM Act. Okay, so let's get into some really nitty-gritty specific questions. There's a new terminology this year that is called a contributor. We don't want people to be confused because it's a little bit scary when you see the word contributor. You think, does that mean I have to now contribute? Is that asking me for money? Do I now have to contribute money? And the answer is no, not necessarily. What it means is every FAFSA form has to have a contributor. That's somebody who's going to be invited to complete a portion of the student's FAFSA. The student themselves is usually the main, like the contributor, a contributor. Then either one or both of their parents is usually also a contributor. If the student is married, their spouse would be a contributor. Okay, it does not mean that by being a contributor that you are automatically obligated to contribute money. That's just the term they use. You're contributing not money, but you're contributing information on this form, on the FAFSA form. And the student might be considered independent, and I'll show you what might qualify them as independent. But unless they are independent, they can't submit their FAFSA application with their contributor, without their contributor submitting their portion and providing consent. So even if you're 18 or your student's going to be 18 and you say, oh, well, my parents aren't helping me with college, I'm 18, I'm on my own. Sorry, until you're 24, they are going to consider the income of your parent or parents. Okay, so they are considered contributors unless you are considered an independent student, and I'll go into what that means in a sec. Okay, so if you have to determine, okay, is one of my parents a contributor? Are both of them contributors? Is a step parent a contributor? What matters in these scenarios? Then I'm hoping that this graphic will kind of help break it down for you. The first question is, are your parents, your either adoptive or biological parents, are they married to each other? If they are, if the answer to that is yes, then it's very simple. Both parents report their information. Now, if they file taxes jointly, it's possible to just submit that one joint tax return or give permission for them to access it. But yes, you do both of those parents' information. They're both contributors. Okay, what if their parents are not married? Then the next question is, if your parents aren't married to each other, do your parents live together? And if the answer to that is yes, if they live together, even if they're not married, if they live together, regardless of if they were ever married, separated, divorced, whatever, if they live together now, then yes, they're both contributors and they both need to provide information on your FAFSA. So what if your parents are not married to each other currently and your parents do not live together? If the answer to that is no, then the next question is, which parent provided more financial support in the last 12 months? This is a little bit tricky, right? Because maybe the custody is 50-50, but maybe one parent provides more food or more clothing or health insurance or housing, rent, whatever expenses might come about. It just depends. So it's supposed to be, you're going to take whichever parent provided more financial support in the last 12 months. Okay. And then the next question is, now, is that parent remarried? If that parent is remarried, okay, then yes, you have to report your parent and your step parent's information. However, if that parent is not remarried, even if they're living with somebody else, another adult, if they're not remarried, then you only have one basically parent contributor, and that's that parent who provided more financial support in the last 12 months. All right. Now, the only people they're going to really ask you about is either your biological parents or your legally adoptive parents. So contributors are not your uncle. It's not your grandma that you live with. It's not a neighbor that you live with or a friend. It's not necessarily even the person who might claim you as a dependent on their taxes. It is either your parent, your adoptive parent. Those are kind of the only options. We'll get into what if you're not in contact with them. That's another situation that comes up sometimes. All right. So if I'm a senior, if you're a 12th grader now, first of all, which FAFSA am I filling out? I know this sounds a little weird because this sounds far away, but you're going to be filling out the 24-25 FAFSA. And the reason why is because if you or your student is a 12th grader now in the 23-24 school year, when are they going to be starting college? Their first year of college is probably going to be in the 24-25 school year. So because that's the FAFSA that you fill out, because that's going to be their first year of college. So you're going to fill out the 24-25 FAFSA, but which tax information do you use? Okay. We use now what's called the prior year. Okay. So if you are the student, or if you have a student that's going to be attending for the first time, say starting in fall of 2024 and going to college in the 24-25 school year, you're going to use your 2022 tax return or tax information. We would recommend, if you have not filed those 2022 taxes yet, then we recommend that you do so ASAP. If the student has a job, they also should be filing taxes. Okay, even if they didn't have to pay any. And then if the parent or parents have a job, they should also be filing taxes. If they're under a certain income level that allows them not to file taxes, that's okay. And there's a place on the form where you can explain, that you're under a certain income amount, so you didn't file. But even if you didn't file taxes, you still have to hit consent or choose consent to what's called the direct data exchange for your student to be able to receive financial aid. So I know sometimes it sounds funny, like, why would I provide consent for the data if I don't have any data because I didn't file taxes? It's just part of the form. You do have to do it. There's nothing for them to look up at that point because you didn't file taxes, and that's okay. But you do have to put, yes, I consent to that direct data exchange from the IRS. Okay, so I said before, now a dependent student, that's probably going to apply to most students, okay? If they have a parent who's living and they're under the age of 24, most likely they're still considered a dependent for the FAFSA. However, so if you're a dependent student, you report your information and the parent reports their information. If you're an independent student, you only report your own financial information. You don't have to report your parents'. And if you're married, you also include your spouses. So what would make someone independent? It's if you could answer yes to any of these questions. If you were born before January 1st of 2001, that would mean that you're now going to be over 24. If you're married, okay, if you'll be working on a master's or doctorate degree, okay, if you're currently on active duty in the armed forces, if you're a veteran, if you have children who live with you and who receive more than half their support from you, if at any time since age 13 you were an orphan with no living or biological or adoptive parent, at any time since you turned 13 were you a ward of the court. And by the way, it doesn't mean you have to be now, but if you ever were since the age of 13. At any time since you turned age 13 were you in foster care. Again, even if you're no longer in foster care, if you were between the age of 13 and now, you could still answer yes to this question. Are you or were you a legally emancipated minor as determined by a court in your state of residence? Are or were you in a legal guardianship with someone other than your parent or step parent as determined by the court? And at any time were you classified or considered unaccompanied, like homeless or self-supporting or at risk of being homeless? And that's something that's a criteria. There's someone in every school district that can make that designation official. And if that's the case for you, then you would be considered independent. So if a student can answer yes to any of these questions, then they would be considered independent. And they don't have to enter their parents' information. They'd just be entering their own, and if they have one, a spouse's information. All right, so let's look at some scenarios that maybe come up and see if you have any questions. Okay, let's say the student's parents are still legally married, but the student says they're not together anymore, okay? Then what would the marital status of the parents be? Okay, like they never legally got a divorce, but they don't consider themselves married. What would the government consider their status to be? Well, on a form like the FAFSA, if the parents are legally married, if they're not legally separated or legally divorced, they will continue to be counted as, quote, married on the financial aid application. Okay. So one of the questions the student's going to be asked is, are you a first-time freshman? Or have you attended, are you a current college student? The only reason this can be confusing, and this applies to a lot of students, maybe you participate in dual enrollment classes, like in high school, you might be taking community college classes, dual enrollment classes, and you know you're getting college credit for those, but does that mean that you're not a first-time freshman, that you're already currently a college student? Okay, this is what we want you to put on the form. No, that is incorrect. It would negatively impact your aid. You need to put that you're enrolling in college for the first year. Even if you've completed a ton of dual enrollment courses, you'll still get college credit for them, don't worry. But for your financial aid, it is best to put that you are a first-time college student. So you're not considered a college student while you're in dual enrollment. You're not technically considered a college student until you graduate from high school. So after you graduate, then you can be considered a college student. But until you graduate, you'll still get all that credit. It'll still go to your college transcript, don't worry, but you want to put that you are a first-time freshman, okay? This is going to help, that would help your financial aid award. What if I'm a dependent student, and this is something we encounter sometimes, but my parents refuse to provide information on my FAFSA or DREAM Act? Maybe they are not in the picture. Maybe you don't have communication with them, or maybe you do have communication with them, but they refuse to provide their information. They consider it intrusive. And what if they just refuse? What do you do in that situation? Unfortunately, you can't be considered independent just because your parents refuse to help with the process. So if you do not provide the required parent contributor information on the FAFSA, the application will be considered rejected and you may not be able to receive any federal student aid. The most you would be able to get, depending on the financial aid office at your college, might be an unsubsidized direct loan, but they need that parent contributor information. So even if the parent refuses, you have to try to convince them and let them know, hey, I'm not saying you have to give me any money. I'm just saying I can't get any money until you give me your financial information. And also, if that's your situation, the FAFSA instructions will tell you what to do if you're in that situation, like how to go about it. Okay, so what are some next steps after this? This next FAFSA that we're going to be filling out, normally it would be open. The normal opening date is October 1st. However, we now expect it to be open on, or maybe slightly before, but probably on December 31st of this year. So it's in essence not really going to open, I don't think, until January. Maybe they'll surprise us and open it earlier in December. I don't know, but they just keep saying it'll be open by December 31st. They will not give an exact date, or they haven't given an exact date yet. So my money's on December 31st. They've also, for the first time in 40 years, they passed the FAFSA Simplification Act in Congress, which means that it is different. And because they're taking away that October, November, December that students would normally have to fill it out, they're going to extend the deadline this year by a month. So the priority deadline, which is almost always March 2nd, and we always say March 2nd, March 2nd, March 2nd. Well, for the first time, they are officially making the deadline April 2nd for this year, for 2024 only, because they're not giving you as much time to fill out the FAFSA itself. So just want you to know the priority deadline has been pushed back to April 2nd, but I still encourage you to fill out the FAFSA or DREAM Act when it opens, which is probably around January 1. Okay, so nobody fills out both the FAFSA and the DREAM Act. Every student who's filling out a financial aid form will fill out one or the other. No one fills out both. It will not work. It's not meant to be, all right? If you're doing the FAFSA, okay, then you will need to create something called an FSA ID. You also have to determine which parent, or is it both parents, that are considered a contributor or contributors. That contributor parent or parents, they'll also need to create an FSA ID of their own. And if your parent, like let's say students that your parent maybe doesn't have a social security number, they still will need to create an FSA ID. There'll be a way and a protocol in place for them to create one by, I think, December 31st. So if your parents don't have a social security number, you can't get an FSA ID yet. The student can, the parent without a social just cannot yet, but they will be able to after December 31st. They're just going to be asking, instead of asking for a social security number as the identifier, they'll ask for some information like, have you ever lived at X address? Or, was this ever one of your phone numbers? Or there's some like kind of like credit bureau type questions. So once the FAFSA opens in late December, students will log in using their FSA ID, and they'll invite the parent who's the contributor, or the parents who are contributors, to contribute that information. Now, if you're filling out the DREAM Act, so this is if you do not have a social security number and maybe you are a DACA or AB 540 student, you don't have to create an FSA ID. The parent does not have to create an FSA ID. What you do need to do is create a California DREAM Act account. So they'll make you create a username and password that you should remember and keep safe. And then once the DREAM Act is supposed to open the same day that the FAFSA opens, then at that time, then you can go in and complete the application. All right, so if you are filling out the FAFSA, okay, this is the process, or kind of what you'll need to get an FSA ID. The student is the first, well, it doesn't have to be, but the student, you do have to create your own FSA ID. They will ask for your name, probably as it appears on a birth certificate or social security card. They will ask for your birth date, including year. They will ask for your social security number. I tell students, don't give your social security number to anybody that asks, except the FAFSA. Okay. It's something you want to keep private. You don't want to give it to me. You don't want to share it with me. You don't want to send me information with your social security number on it. If you do that, black it out first. Okay. So that is a private thing, but this is a government website and it is okay to enter it there. They also want your address, the address where you live. They will also ask for a phone number. They prefer a mobile number because so they can send you texts or so you can download an app. They'll also ask you for an email address. Students, I'm going to strongly encourage you not to use your school or district mail. If your email address ends in something like sandy.net, guhsd.net, sweetwaterschools.net, hightechhigh.org, Gomper student, any E3, those are going to end when you graduate. As soon as you graduate, that email is gone. And so now all the information that FAFSA is trying to send you, where do they send it? Right? It bounces back to them and that's bad. You want to get it. So you want to use an email address that you can still use after you graduate from high school. And I would say the same thing for parents. If you know that you're at a job where you're going to keep that email address forever, that's fine. But if not, I would strongly recommend you use something like a Gmail or something you'll have even if you change jobs or even if you change locations or even if you change internet providers in your home. Okay. So after completing your FSA ID, students, they'll need to write down their username, which has to be different than their email address, unfortunately. They have to have their password that they create. And then also they're going to be given a backup code so that if they forget their username and password, at least they can use a backup code. So that's the process for students. Because if a parent is a contributor, and sometimes both of your parents are contributors. Sometimes it's a parent and a step parent or just one parent, depends on your situation. But they also have to create an FSA ID. They'll also be asked for the same information, their name, their birth date, their social security number, if they have one. If not, there's a little box you can check saying, I don't have a social security number, and that's okay. Address, phone number, email address. And then they'll have to save the same thing. They'll have to create a username, a password, and then they'll be given a backup code. And it's important to keep that information safe. There's also going to be different systems that you can use, for example, multi-factor authentication, so that they can send you a text and verify that it's you. They'll also ask you some security questions. Will also be a couple things that you can do, like, for example, you can download an app to your phone that's like, it's from the Google Store, it's an authenticator app. The nice thing about it is if they ever need to contact you to use that app to log into your FAFSA, it doesn't require cell service or Wi-Fi. So if your Wi-Fi is slow, or if you're somewhere with no Wi-Fi or somewhere with no cell service, if you have that app on your phone, you can still be working on, financial aid stuff or FAFSA stuff. So just FYI, those are some other options that, even though they're extra steps, it might make it easier down the line in case. I know none of us have ever forgotten our passwords for anything, right? But in case you do, it's good to have these other steps. So our website is calsoapsandiego.org. Like I said, on the webinar blog section is where we'll be posting this at some point tomorrow. We're on Instagram at CalSoap San Diego. We're also on Facebook and Twitter X at San Diego CalSoap, and we have a YouTube channel as well. We have a lot of different programs coming up. You can see the webinar you're in right now here. And then also we're going to have a lot of, we call them Cash for College workshops. The Cash for College workshops that begin in January, those are not workshops like this. They're not webinars. They're not a lecture. They're not a presentation. They're literally where you go when you say, I need one-on-one help filling this form out, and you get help from, it could be a student staff member, it could be someone from a financial aid office, it could be a counselor, but someone who's had a little bit of training in this will hopefully be able to go through and help you fill out either your FAFSA or your DREAM Act and answer your individual questions about your individual form. Okay, so if you need help at any point, notice that in January and February, we have tons of events. We have them both in person and we have them online virtually. We have them on Saturday mornings, as well as we have some evening ones as well. Like you'll notice some of the Wednesday night ones from 5 to 7 p.m. So we try to make them available all across the county. On January 20th, for example, we're going to have 21 different locations throughout the county, from South Bay to East County to North County to Central. There's going to be 21 different locations where you can go for a Cash for College workshop. Hopefully one of those is somewhere close to you. And if you are homebound and you don't want to leave at all, as long as you have internet access, you can get help virtually online. Okay, so let's see. Is that okay? I think that is the last slide. So I'll stop sharing. I just want to ask at this point for Tori and Charmaine, is there anything in the Q&A that you have not been able to answer, or anything that you did answer but you want me to answer to the whole group?
Nope, not a lot of action there tonight.
Okay, all right. If there are no more questions, then I'm not going to take more of your time. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. Again, my email address is in the chat, kkwhitaker@ucsd.edu. You can contact me or contact anyone at CalSOAP. If you have further questions, if you want a copy of the slide deck, again, we'll post that tomorrow on our website. Thank you so much for joining us. We were able to answer some questions, and we hope to see you soon. Get ready for that FAFSA to become open. Wait, I see something in the Q&A. Oh, how long does it take to fill out the form? It depends, but I'll say this. If you have all your information together, like your tax returns, your asset and income information, if you have everything ready to go, it honestly might take as little as like 15 minutes to fill it out when it actually opens. It's not open yet. But when you do, if you have everything ready to go, you have your FSA ID, you have everything ready, it could be a very short period of time. It might take up to an hour, but honestly, if you have all the info you need, it doesn't take too long. That's a good question, though. When do they let you know what you're approved for? Okay, so you're going to get back a student aid report, usually within, I would say, within 2 weeks of filling out the FAFSA. First, you'll just get an auto reply saying thank you for submitting, and after both the student and the contributors, parents have all contributed. And usually within 2 weeks, though, they'll give you back something that will give you an SAI, Student Aid Index, and they might say you're probably eligible for this amount of Pell, this amount of Cal, and then it might even say, like if you specifically put a community college, it might say you're eligible for the Promise. And then it will also say if you're eligible for any loans or any federal work study. And at that point, you can, even if, let's say you get back a report and it's not enough, you're like, well, this won't cover all my expenses. This only covers a fourth or half or whatever. Also remember that your college's financial aid office is going to get this, and they will also be looking for scholarships and grants from that specific college or university to hopefully apply to you. And you can also look for scholarships on your own independently. So scholarships are not federal or state, but the ones that are like from businesses, from private individuals, from organizations like the San Diego Foundation, for example, is a good one here. You can get those regardless, or in addition to federal and state money. Ooh, I want to answer this question. What kind of assets need to be reported on the application? Very interesting question. So I am going to say something I discovered today, interestingly. Normally, all assets would need to be reported. What is not an asset is the residence you live in. So like if you live in a house and you own it outright, or you're making mortgage payments on it, that's not considered an asset. That's considered your home. Okay. Also not considered an asset is like money that's in a retirement account, like an IRA Roth, something like that. Okay. Or a 403B. That's not considered an asset. That's your retirement money. What is considered an asset would be any money in checkings or savings accounts, any investments that you have that are not specifically retirement related, okay? And if you have something like a boat, an RV, an extra property that you rent, like a rental property, a business or a farm or something like that, those are all considered assets. But this is interesting. I don't know if this is because the FAFSA is new and they're going to change this, but currently, what they have said is that if the student goes to school in a district where they receive free and reduced lunch, and that's universal, and for example, San Diego Unified is one of those, okay, that you then are exempt from reporting assets on the FAFSA. So when the student checks, I'm eligible for free and reduced lunch, even if they don't fill out an application for that free and reduced lunch, even if they're getting it through universal reduced lunch, that means that they're exempt from reporting assets. I still can't quite believe that's true, and I wonder if they're going to change that as soon as the FAFSA opens in December. But currently, that's the deal with the new FAFSA, is that they would not have to report assets if the student goes to school where they're getting free and reduced lunch or are eligible for it. And so if it's a universal program like it is in some districts, that's a very interesting thing that's kind of new this year. Okay. Anything else? Let's see. Yes, the 529 College Fund is considered an asset and you do need to report it. However, as far as where you report it or how you report it, this is interesting. So the 529 has an owner and it has a beneficiary. That could be the same person. Me as a student, I could start my own 529 account and ask people to contribute it. And it could be, I could be the owner of the account and it could be in my name. So I'm going to be the one using it for college. The way most 529s are set up is that the parent is the quote unquote owner of the account. And by the way, it doesn't have to be the parent. It could be like a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, whatever. Okay. But one person, often the parent, is the quote owner of the account, even if the account is in the name of your student. When you're listing it as an asset, parents, you're going to be listing it as an asset for yourself, okay, that it's one of your assets if you, quote, are the owner of the account. It doesn't have to be listed as a student asset, even if the student is the one who would benefit from the funds, because technically you could change that beneficiary to anybody that you want to. So you can change, like you could change it and put it in your own name, right? You could change it and put it in a different child's name. Like you can do that. So just make sure that it's a separate thing. Like if the student doesn't have to report it as their asset, usually the parent is reporting it as an asset. But a 529 is a good asset to have. I know that it is an asset and it does, in that sense, it counts against you because it's like money for college, but because it's tax exempt, it's a much better deal. Okay, I have my own checking and savings. My son has a CD. Do I have to report his CD as an asset? Okay. All right. So what I would do is because he's getting the free universal lunch, then what I would do is check that question that yes, he's getting the free universal lunch. And at that point, I don't think they'll ask either you or him asset information. If they do, then I think the CD, if it's in his name, then he would report it as one of his assets, whereas your checking and savings, that would be reported as a parent or contributor asset on the FAFSA. Okay, had to sell my home because of a divorce. Money from the sale of the house is in a savings account. How will that affect financial aid? Oh, this is a good question. Okay, if you are in kind of like an in transition situation, like the one you're describing, which is not uncommon, what you're basically going to be reporting is what the case is for the last like 12-month period. So in this case, it's like, what was the situation in 2022? Or for the last 12 months. What I'm going to recommend for this one is that you actually contact Federal Student Aid yourself. They do have an 800 number. All right, it's 1-800-4-FED-AID. And they also have a chat bot and they also have an email feature. So you can ask by email, by chat, or to call during business hours. And I would ask them that question. The thing is that might change. Like maybe those savings will go into buying a house in a year from now. And then that house becomes your residence and it's no longer an asset. So because the student fills out the FAFSA once a year for every year they're in college, understand that it might change from year to year. But if you're undergoing kind of a transition like that one, you want to ask the federal government like how you should report things to make sure you do it right. I don't want to give you the wrong answer. And the other thing is you want to tell your student, wherever they end up going to college, you want to tell their financial aid office the situation, because if it looks like you have more assets than you do because you're renting instead of owning, you need to make sure that the financial aid office knows that. Is your car an asset? No, usually a car is not considered an asset. They might have some kind of limit, like, well, if you own more, like a bigger number of cars than there are family members or something like that, it might be considered an asset. But normally a car is not considered an asset unless it's something like for a car show and it's your antique baby, something like that. But if it's a car that you drive, no, that's usually not considered an asset. All right. Good questions. Thank you for asking. And Tori and Charmaine, thank you for answering. We hope we answered your questions. We know that more might come up, so feel free to contact us and ask, and I will go ahead and end the webinar and thank everybody for attending, and especially thank you to Charmaine and Tori for helping out at the Q&A. Thank you both. All right. Bye, everybody.